Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. Let me just let some people in that are in the waiting room.
Okay.
We'll get started. Um, so my name is Courtney. I passed the BTLPT a couple of years ago, and I've been tutoring for it, and I'm certified in lots of different areas. So I've passed 15 of these exams now, and so I know how to help people pass these tests. And before we get started, I want to show you some information about the test. So if you Google EPV passing rates, this is the data by Texas Education Agency. You can see texas.gov TEA. Click on pass rates. And this will show you the passing rate. You can see for the BTLPT, let me make this bigger because I know that's tiny. For the BTLPT, the passing rate for first time takers, this is first attempt, is 55%. So you can see that's quite a bit lower than most of the other tests. It's not the lowest. There are tests with lower scores like computer science, some of the technical ones have much lower passing rates, but you can see a lot of the tests have passing rates in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Um, so it's got a low passing rate. And interestingly, most of the people that contact me, who I think are representative of the people that take it throughout the state, Spanish is their first language. So we're not talking about second language learners failing this test. I mean, some of them do, but it's a lot of heritage speakers that speak Spanish at home but grew up here that are struggling with this test, right? So that really can help native speakers, heritage speakers, second language learners, but most of the people I work with are heritage speakers. And what's good about working with me too is that I know what kind of mistakes each type of learner makes. So second language learners make very different mistakes than heritage speakers, and even native speakers make mistakes too. So I know what kind of mistakes each type of learner makes or each type of speaker. So that's just some data. So that maybe will make you feel better if you took it and didn't pass it. You can see about half the people that take it the first time don't pass it. So you're not alone, right? So now another thing I want to show you that you've probably already seen. If you Google Texas NESINC manual, click on prepare, scroll down and click on BTLPT and click on go. You can see the overview and exam framework. It says it's a 5 hour test, but it's not 5 hours because everything's timed and it takes about 3 to 3.5 hours. So you're not going to be there 5 hours. 84 selected response questions and 7 constructed response tasks. Um, See, it even says right here, although Texas test sessions are 5 hours long, this is less than 5 hours. Um, Listening comprehension is 21% of the test. Reading comprehension is 26% of the test. Oral expression is 29%, and written expression is 24%. The last couple times I've done free tutoring, we've done oral expression. So tonight I thought we would do something different. And the two things that people need the most help with is the oral expression and the written expression. So in my Tuesday night group, my paid tutoring, we practice everything, all of the tasks, all of the speaking, all of the writing, the listening, the reading. But in free tutoring, I pick one thing and we focus on that because it's short, right? So tonight I thought we would talk about the lesson plan because that's what I consistently hear from people that they're nervous about the lesson plan. So the lesson plan is 8% of the test because there's three written expression tasks. So each one is 8%. So if we go back here and click on sample written expression constructive response assignments, you can see there's three: the response to letter, memo, or email, the lesson plan, the opinion position essay. You only get 70 minutes to write all three tasks, which is very rushed. So I allowed myself more like 30 minutes for the lesson plan and 20 minutes for the other two. But I recommend you practice and see how much time you need for each task. And this free manual has lots of examples. It shows you examples of how to get each score. So you can do that. Let's look at the rubric for the lesson plan. You can look at all of the rubrics in here, and I definitely recommend you do that, but we'll look at just the lesson plan tonight. To get a perfect score of 3, this is what you have to do. On your score report, it's going to show out of 12 points. That's because there's two people that grade it, and then they do a multiplier. So it's not out of 3 points or even out of 6 points, it's out of 12 points. And most people are getting 6 or 7.5 on their lesson plan, which is not enough. We want to aim for 10.5 or 12, right? Even 9 is pretty good. To get full credit, we need to fully address and fully elaborate all categories that are required, which is the school grade, vocabulary, materials, procedure, and assessment. For topic development, we need to show a high degree of content understanding. All content information is accurate and well developed. All teaching techniques described are appropriate for grade level and objective given. All materials and activities discussed are appropriate for grade level and objective given. Assessment instrument described elicits appropriate information on targeted learning objective and is appropriate for grade level. So notice they keep saying it's appropriate for the grade level, appropriate for the objective. Those are the key things we need to do. Focus on making everything appropriate for the grade level that we get to select, right? You get to select the grade level. You don't get to pick the objective. So when you pick the grade level, it needs to make sense for the objective, right? And then your response needs to be well organized and coherent, show a high or mid-high degree of control over a variety of structures. That means you vary your tenses. So you use not only the present tense, but also the future tense, the past tenses, the conditional, the future, and the subjunctive mood. You might not know what all of those things are, but I bet you know how to use them if Spanish is your first language. So just be thinking, I want to change up the way I'm wording things, especially with my verbs. If you're a second language learner, I've noticed a lot of them tend to focus on the present tense and they don't always use the other tenses. So make a conscious effort to use your different tenses if you're a second language learner, right? Varied vocabulary, appropriate for the content and used with precision. Very few errors in the conventions of written language, orthography, spelling, accent marks, and punctuation. Notice they specifically mention accent marks. And that's something most people that work with me don't know. So I'm teaching that tonight in my group tutoring at 7:30. We're going over accent mark rules and tips because second language learners usually know where their accent marks go. And native speakers that grew up in Mexico or Spain, they usually know. But heritage speakers that grew up here and speak Spanish at home don't usually know where accent marks go. And that's most of my clients. So we spend some time on that, learning where the accent marks go. Punctuation and sentence structure. Register is appropriate. That means your level of formality. So if it's a task that requires formal language, then you use formal language. And if it's informal, then you use informal. I used to think it was always formal for the test, but I have heard of people getting an informal email where they're emailing a cousin or something like that, right? So, uh, but for the lesson plan, it's going to be formal language, right? So that's how we get a perfect score. So I'll show you really quickly my course in tutoring. I have a comprehensive program where we meet Tuesday nights at 7:30 for a whole hour and we practice everything. So you can see tonight we're doing written expression 2 and the accent marks, and then listening and reading and then speaking, and we keep going with all of those. And then I always post the recordings from the previous tutoring sessions, and then lots of listening help, lots of reading practice. And then for the speaking, you upload your own assignments, and for writing, you upload your own assignments too and get feedback. But let's look at a free lesson plan that I made. Well, it's not really free. It's in my course in tutoring, but tonight you're going to get to see it for free. So um, when you take the test, you sign an affidavit that you will not disclose anything about the test in part or whole. So I'm very careful that I don't share anything from my test, right? Or if somebody emails me something they're not supposed to email me, then I don't share that. But sometimes people ask me for a lesson plan about a certain topic, like a generic topic, and I'll take that into consideration. But if they're emailing me the specific objective, that's cheating, and I don't do that, right? So you could get something similar on your test, but be careful because what we're focusing on is the objective, and your objective is not going to be the same because I don't know what the objective is, and even if I knew, I wouldn't share it, right? But maybe you get one on nonfiction, or maybe you get one on fiction. So you might get one on the same topic, but the objective will be different. So be careful that you match everything to the objective. So I don't know what the topics are or the objectives, but sometimes people email saying, can you write a lesson plan about nonfiction or about fiction? And I'll make one, but I don't know what the objectives are. Uh, so you can't use this exact lesson plan, even if you get one on nonfiction, because you have to change it to meet the objective, right? So the materia, they give you this, artes del lenguaje y lectura. They give you the tema, los rasgos de no ficción. Rasgos is traits, right? They give you the objetivo. Después de la lección, los estudiantes identificarán los rasgos de textos informativos, right? So they give you all of this. Then you have to choose the grade level. You have to come up with the vocabulary that works for the lesson, for the objective, the materials, and the activities, and the assessment. That's your job, right? So they'll give you the part that I just explained, and then you do the rest. Now, whenever I write these lesson plans at home, I look at the TEKS to see what grade levels they do this at, right? And that way I'm getting ready for the test. I did this before I took the test. I looked at the TEKS for the different grade levels. What are they learning at the different grade levels? I can tell you that most people ask me about language arts lesson plans. So I think you're likely to see a language arts lesson plan, but it could be about science, social studies, or math, right? But it seems like people ask me the most about language arts. So I looked up the TEKS that goes with this. And on the test day, you wouldn't be able to do that. But if you do it ahead of time, you'll kind of already know, right? So to find the TEKS, you just go to Google, type in TEKS in Espanol, and it'll come right up, right? And I'll put it in the chat box too. So you can read over the TEKS. That's also good to do because you'll learn the cognitive academic Spanish for the different subjects, right? Let's see, where was I? So I looked at the TEKS. This is not going to be on the test and you won't have access to it, but I'm practicing, so I'm using resources that I wouldn't have on the test, and that's okay because I'm getting ready. It says, reconozca las características y estructuras del texto informativo, incluyendo la idea central y la evidencia que la apoya, con la ayuda de un adulto. Rasgos y gráficas simples para localizar o obtener información, patrones organizacionales tales como el orden cronológico y la descripción, con la ayuda de un adulto. So I picked first grade text, but really they do this at all grade levels, right? But some of them don't work for all grade levels. That's why you have to look at the TEKS. So this helps me pick up some vocabulary words by looking at the TEKS, right? So I have texto informativo. Let's look at the objective again. After the lesson, they will identify traits of informative text, not fiction, right? So that's what they're going to be doing, identifying traits. So here's our vocabulary. Texto informativo, idea central, evidencia, orden cronológico, secuencia, datos, eventos, principio, medio, final. En de materiales, video, organizador gráfico, libros de no ficción, biografías. And then we have procedimientos. Al principio de la lección, la maestra introducirá las palabras de vocabulario. You always want to say how you're going to teach the vocabulary words. That's very important. Even though that's not really part of the objective, it's preparing the foundation. Luego verán un video que explica las palabras. This is something I see wrong all the time. People use the future tense without accent marks. But the future tense has accent marks on all forms except nosotros. So you're going to be using the accent marks a lot on the future tense. Después, los estudiantes usarán las palabras en oraciones originales. La maestra explicará que los cuentos son de ficción, pero hoy vamos a aprender de la no ficción. So I'm acknowledging that they're not really used to this, right? So we're doing something different than they're used to. Vamos a leer algunos textos informativos. La maestra va a explicar cómo adivinar la idea central y va a mostrarles cómo poner los datos de un texto en orden cronológico. Luego juntos van a leer una biografía corta y sencilla de Rosa Parks. So notice it says they're going to do it together because remember, at first grade, it's with the help of an adult. Van a buscar los datos y los eventos. La maestra les va a preguntar, ¿cómo podemos poner los datos en orden cronológico? ¿Qué rasgos de no ficción encontraron en el texto? So the traits that we were talking about, having a main idea, evidence, order, right? They're looking for those traits, which is part of the objective, right? The objective is for them to identify traits. So we're hitting the objective, which is very important, and it's appropriate for the grade level. En un organizador gráfico van a colocar los eventos de la biografía en orden cronológico. Van a discutir los rasgos de la no ficción que encontraron en el texto. Evaluación. I always use two evaluations because it shows that you have knowledge of pedagogy, the art and science of teaching, right? Because we know that some students don't do well on formal tests and they do better on informal tests. So we want to have both. La evaluación formal es el organizador gráfico. La evaluación informal es la discusión sobre los textos de no ficción. So that's the lesson plan. But I definitely recommend before you take your test that you try writing one on each subject, math, science, social studies, language arts. I've never heard of anybody getting one on fine arts. There's no TEKS in Spanish and fine arts, so I don't think they do that. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the lesson plan or the test? No? So if you need help passing, I have a great program and it's a good group. We meet on Tuesday nights at 7:30, so there's still time to join tonight if you are wanting some extra preparation. We meet for a whole hour. Yeah, the accent marks on the words, you have to put accent marks on the words, so I teach that. Uh, you do have to know what's appropriate for grades, so that's why I said to go over the TEKS. You have to know what's appropriate for each grade. Yeah, it's not easy. The BTLPT is probably the hardest test out of all the ones that I've taken. And I've taken 15 of them, but I thought it was the hardest. Um, so yeah, some people say just pick one grade level and study the TEKS for that. But what if you get one on photosynthesis and you picked second grade and they don't do photosynthesis in second grade? That's why I don't say that. I think you look at all the TEKS and at least get a feel for what's taught at each grade level. But you could definitely focus on one and be more familiar with that. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question.
Sure.
Um, so you know how you have it formatted on a Word doc? Is that how you've been practicing, or that's how you practiced in order to kind of, I guess, understand it? Because I know we can't see how it looks in the test. I haven't taken it yet.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
but
use Word to practice and then it catches
okay.
mistakes too. I use Google Docs. I like Google Docs more than Word. Um, but if you want to see what the real test looks like, you can pay for that $10 test.
Okay.
And it'll show you what the real test looks like. This is almost exactly like the real test. So it's the same
And
software and everything.
and it times you the same way.
Times you, yeah. So make
Okay.
sure that you have like 3.5 hours to sit down in a row and do it because it starts you and you have it for 120 days, but you can't pause it and restart it. So it'll time you out and then you'll just be able to see what you missed, but you won't be able to start it over. You'd have to buy it again to start it over.
Okay. So
That
you have
happened to me because
120
I
days
didn't
to
know that.
you
Yeah.
have 100 days, 120 days to take the test?
Yeah, you can, and to view it afterwards, but you can't restart it. So, like, for example, I bought it for the LOTE, and that's
Mm-hmm.
only a 5 hour test, right? And I started it and then I stopped it, and I could just see the questions that I already answered, and then I could see the other ones, what the right answers are, but it wouldn't let me retake it. So, I'm
Oh,
paying
okay.
again to retake it.
Okay. Do you also do like the free sessions for the supplemental? Or you just
Not usually.
no.
I don't have as
Okay.
much demand for that, but I do have a really good course for that if you need a course
Okay.
for that. And I think you'll find you don't really need tutoring for that because that test has a higher passing rate. As long as you have a good study guide, it's
Mm-hmm.
not that bad. Um, so I have a good course for that, and it's got videos and everything that you need, practice questions. But I
Okay.
don't usually do tutoring for that one because people consistently ask for LOTE, BTLPT course subjects, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't get as many people asking for the supplemental.
Okay. Now would you recommend, like, I know you said that some people focus on just a certain grade level.
Mhm.
Um, Now say I do want to go through each grade level's teaks. Do you recommend maybe like start with kinder, do it like 2, 3 days, and then maybe first grade 2, 3 days, and so on and so on? Or how can I,
However long
what
it
would be
takes
an
you.
advice to like attack those
Yeah.
teaks?
I just read through them all in a couple of days. Like
Okay.
I didn't spend weeks on it by any means. But what benefited me was I used to be a substitute teacher
Mm-hmm.
and I subbed in all grade levels. So I already knew a lot of what they were doing in the different grade levels because I had subbed for a while. So I can
Okay.
remember, oh, I taught fractions in third grade and I taught US history in fifth grade. And, and also I went to school in Texas and some of the things they still do in the same order. Not everything, but some of the stuff they still do in the same order. So I could even think back, oh, when I learned this, then some of it's the same. Um, but I wouldn't spend weeks on the teaks, but I would spend a lot of time getting better at your accent marks because they count
Okay.
quite a bit for that, and people don't know that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, my course has prompts for the oral practice. So if you enroll, you'll have lots of prompts for the oral section. And I have some free videos on YouTube that where I've done speaking. So you could go to YouTube Texas Teacher Today and find some of my BTLPT speaking stuff. But my course has lots of practice, and you even upload your own for feedback. So I just heard from somebody that passed the BTLPT. She got her score last week, and she said that's what helped her the most out of everything in my course. It was the assignments that she did and got feedback because then she knew what to do differently for her test. And honestly, like most people pass the speaking, but most people have to resubmit the writing. Almost everybody has to resubmit at least one writing because they miss accent marks, grammar, spelling, punctuation, or they don't hit the objective, right? So I'm looking for all of those things. So hardly anybody passes all of their writing, but most people do better on the speaking. There's just a little bit of things to tweak on that.
So if you miss, say you do everything correctly, but you miss a section of the writing portion, you have to redo the whole test?
Yeah, you have to redo the whole test. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not like the core subjects where you can just take the part you failed. Yeah, you have to redo the whole thing. But the benefit of that, if you look at it this way, it can actually be a good thing. Like when I took the BTLPT, I had almost perfect score on reading and listening. I barely missed anything. But they're
Okay.
real picky on their writing and speaking. So they counted off for my writing and speaking. But because I did so well on reading and listening, I still had a really high score, right?
Okay.
So it works to your advantage in a way because your strong areas can boost your weak areas. But like on the core subjects, if you get a 250 on math and a 230 on language arts, you can't borrow the 10 points from math, you know?
Yeah, of course.
So this kind of works out well if you have a real strong area. It can boost your weak areas. And that's why I tell people that join my course in tutoring. Some people say, well, I'm really good at reading. I don't need to practice reading. And I say, no, you really need to practice everything because you can probably still get more points in reading. And you want to maximize everything so you have the best chance of passing instead of skipping parts that you think you're good at. You might as well just do all of it.
I see that somebody asked, and I guess I have the same question. Is there a minimum of words that we have to include in the lesson plan?
Yeah, there is. It tells you in this manual, and I can't remember offhand. Let me see if I can find it real quick, if I still have it open. Um, did I close out the preparation manual? I guess I closed it out. Let me look it up real quick, but I've got to run in just a minute because I've got more tutoring in just
Mhm.
5 minutes. So I've got to get ready for the next one. But it tells you all of the minimum words. So each one has a minimum word count. So if you go to this free manual, it will tell you everything you need to know about the test.
Okay.
So if we go to sample written expression, 150 words.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's 150 words. So it's pretty short. All of them are pretty short, which is good because they don't give you much time to do it. Um, but but yeah, but if you guys want to join me, it's a great group. Everybody really participates well. I've noticed they participate better in my paid tutoring than in my free tutoring. And I think that's because it's a smaller group and they with me every week so they get used to each other and they feel comfortable. So they actually practice the speaking, they ask questions, It's interactive. But I've got to get ready for my next one. But I hope you guys have a great night. And if you have any questions, you can text or call me. I'll put my phone number in the chat box too.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it. Y'all have a great night.
You too.